Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, I've got a review for you of Baxter by Jessica Hamilton. So this is a book that's also available under the title Hellhound, with the author's name given as Ken Greenhall. So Jessica Hamilton was a pseudonym, the author's real name is Ken Greenhall, and that, I believe, is how you can buy it today. So I think Valancourt Books issued a new edition of it not that long ago, with the Hellhound title and Ken Greenhall's name on the cover. So it originally came out in 1977, and it's a really, really interesting book. So it's one of those books I've kind of been aware of for a while, and had never got round to reading, and then fancied reading it and set up an eBay saved search, which is how I get a lot of these more difficult to get books. And eventually it popped up at a decent price and I grabbed it and read it in a couple of hours. It's very short, but a really, really interesting and very different kind of horror novel. So it's about Baxter, who is the central character, who is a dog. So Baxter is like a bull terrier, and when the book starts, his owner is this elderly woman, and what becomes immediately apparent. So the first chapter, indeed, of the book is written from Baxter's perspective, and many of the parts of the book, as the story progresses, are so it kind of flips between first person from Baxter's perspective and third person from the perspective of the human characters around him. What becomes apparent very early on is that Baxter, as well as being a dog, is a psychopath. So Baxter kills with kind of no conscience at all, and indeed he fairly quickly kills the old lady because effectively he's bored of being owned by her and longs for more interesting owners. And what then happens thereafter in the book is he gets taken in by different people. And for different reasons, gets moved on again a couple of times. But throughout it, he remains a psychopath, and takes a few more victims as the book goes on. The main bulk of the book is about Baxter's relationship with a kind of, I'm not sure how old he is, kind of on the cusp of his teenage years, I think, kind of 13, 14-year-old boy called Carl, who lives in the same neighbourhood and ends up looking after Baxter for a period of time. And Carl is a somewhat troubled young man going through a phase of being fascinated with the Nazis and with violence and things like that. And that the kind of interplay between Baxter and Carl is just absolutely fascinating. It's a relationship which is kind of absolutely central to the book, and it's rare that you see a relationship, I think, in a book captured as well as this. I found it absolutely fascinating, the kind of interplay between them and the way they play off each other's kind of darker drives, if you like. And Baxter is just an absolutely fantastic character. He's really, really interesting. And the parts of the book that were written by him, I think, are the parts I enjoyed the most. What's most, I guess, noticeable about him is that he is. I didn't find him convincing as a dog. So at no point did I believe that what I was reading were actually the thoughts of a dog. He's just too articulate and too intelligent, but he's absolutely fascinating. Despite the fact I wasn't convinced by him as a character, he's still a brilliant character, and I think there's something quite interesting about that, isn't there? I think there is. I think characters can be fantastic characters without being convincing. I think the fact that he is a dog throws that into the spotlight a bit more, because you kind of expect him to be convincingly canine, I suppose. And as I say, I don't think he is, but he's such an interesting character, and the way he describes the kind of human world around him is quite amusing at times and always really interesting. But just his single-mindedness and his not kind of brutality. I wouldn't have said he was brutal, but his complete lack of concern for the lives of other people and in his kind of inherent selfishness make him a really, really, really interesting character. So yeah, it's only a short book. It's only like 140 pages. But it's really, really interesting and not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting, a kind of Mad Dog on the Rampage kind of a book. I knew that parts of it were written from Baxter's perspective, but I was expecting him to be much more of a kind of out of control character than he is. In fact, he's incredibly in control of himself throughout the book, apart from when he meets female dogs on heat, and those parts are quite amusing because he's just completely unable to control his urges and feels deeply ashamed afterwards of what he's done. So yeah, as I say, anyway, I'm rambling a bit now, but yeah, a really, really interesting book. Thoroughly recommend it. Not necessarily scary or horrific in the way that horror books can be, but definitely a really interesting kind of psychological thriller, I suppose, with the added twist of the fact that one of the main characters is a dog and a really interestingly written dog as well. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it and definitely recommend it. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves, and that book is The Cats by Nick Sharman, which is kind of what I expected Baxter to be like. So The Cats is a really, really cheesy British horror novel about brutal, ferocious cats on the rampage, eating people, basically. It's very silly, but quite a lot of fun. Hope you found that interesting. Do let me know if you've read Baxter and what you thought of it. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.